Mr. President, I rise today in hopes of passing a bill in a few minutes that would support our veterans and our service members by making sure that when they want to grow their families, they can get the care and services they need, including IVF. The recent chaos in Alabama caused by far-right ideology put a national spotlight on just how crucial IVF is to so many women and families who are desperately hoping and trying to have children. The first thing we heard after IVF was thrown into uncertainty in Alabama was the horror of women and the families who had their dreams turned into nightmares as appointments were canceled, tens of thousands of dollars, months of appointments were callously tossed out of the window by Alabama's Supreme Court. Its decision rested on extreme ideology, an ideology Republicans are working right now to enshrine into law nationwide. Next, we heard Republicans tripping over themselves to proclaim that they stand for IVF, even while still standing by the same extreme fetal personhood laws that caused all of this chaos in the first place. I have said this before, but given how Republicans refuse to publicly disavow fetal personhood, it clearly bears repeating. When Republicans support legislation that says a fertilized egg has the same rights and protections as a living, breathing human person, that is fundamentally incompatible with supporting IVF. That is the very ideology that caused the disaster in Alabama. And right now, the majority of House Republicans are co-sponsors of a national abortion ban that would enshrine fetal personhood in federal law, endangering IVF treatments everywhere. But if Republicans really do now want to support IVF, if they really do want to help people who are trying to grow their family, why not start with our veterans and our service members? These are the men and women who fought to protect our families. Why don't we make sure they all have the support they need to grow theirs? I reintroduced a bill with Senator Duckworth last year. It's the Veteran Families Health Services Act, and that would do just that. I've been working to pass this bill for well over a decade now. It has gone through countless rounds of technical edits and reviews, and it is more than ready for prime time, and this is exactly the kind of straightforward legislation that we should pass through unanimous consent. It hasn't just passed committee before, it actually passed the Senate before. The goal of this bill is very simple. It expands the fertility treatments and family building services that are covered under service members and veterans health care. That means finally having the coverage that gives service members and veterans the option to freeze eggs or sperm before deployment. It means expanding adoption assistance at the VA. And Mr. President, it means expanding access to IVF for all of our veterans and service members. Current coverage policies for VA and DoD still leave out many committed, loving people who want to start a family. We're talking about a bill that would help our wounded warriors get the care and coverage they need to start a family. I'm really glad DoD and VA have been taking some steps under President Biden to offer this care to more people, including the expansion that the VA announced just yesterday, but we still have a long ways to go. I hope that every one of my colleagues would agree that our country should keep that basic promise we make to our service members to take care of them when they come home. That when a soldier comes home with injuries and subsequently needs IVF because of that to start a family, or really when any soldier needs IVF to start a family, they should be able to get it. So how about we take action right now, today, to make that a reality? It should not be controversial, especially if Republicans are serious, even in the slightest, about supporting IVF. This bill is just saying, yes, we want to make sure that all of our veterans, all of our service members have access to family building services and fertility treatments they need. Given all that we have heard in recent weeks, this should be hugely bipartisan. You stand by our veterans, if you stand by IVF, if you want to see our military families growing and thriving, we need to send that message now and send this legislation that I will be asking unanimous consent on shortly to the President's desk as soon as possible. Thank you, Mr. President. I know I have a number of members who are coming to the floor to speak to this, so I will suggest the absence of a quorum until that time.
Clerk will call the roll.
I'm very proud to be here today, Mr. President, to join my great colleague from the state of Washington to support the Veterans Families Health Services Act. At a time when there are many, many complex and difficult issues, some of them nowhere near black and white, a lot of gray areas of policy abroad and at home, there is one issue that ought to be absolutely clear, unequivocally, in terms of what we should do, the right thing to do, the really obligatory thing to do, and that is to make sure that our men and women who serve in uniform and our veterans have access to the health care they deserve, and in particular, reproductive health care, and most especially IVF treatment. Now, the Alabama Supreme Court in the LePage decision is another step in the assault on women's rights and women's health care, and in fact, on women. The kinds of restrictions placed on IVF treatment have been essentially disowned and disavowed by many Republicans who want to run away as far as they can, as quickly as they can from that decision, and are saying, oh, well, we're in favor of IVF, but not against laws that restrict IVF. Well, they can't have it both ways. And here's a chance for them to show in supremely important terms that they're in favor of this kind of treatment for our men and women who, in some sense, have earned it and deserve it more than, or as much as, any other American, because they're the ones who put on uniforms and defend our rights and our freedoms, and they're the ones who afterward come back to their communities as veterans and continue to serve us. This measure essentially provides guarantees for active duty service members and veterans access to IVF. It expands adoption assistance at the VA and counseling services for couples navigating that process. And there is very little to be said that wouldn't repeat the basic common sense of this proposal, and it shouldn't even need to be said that military families don't choose where they live. They're assigned to one state or another, one country or another. When they answer the nation's call, they don't sign up for service in Connecticut at the sub base. They sign up and they raise their right hand, and their access to IVF shouldn't be dependent on the state where they are assigned or the country. It ought to be available to every service member regardless of their posting. They defend our rights every day, and we must protect theirs with this bill. And veterans who have completed their service honorably deserve the same protection in access to family planning services. Our veterans who receive care at the VA deserve the highest standard, the gold standard, not some diluted standard because of a state law that restricts access to IVF. Their lives are already complex and challenging enough. We shouldn't complicate them further with administrative barriers. And I will just repeat what I said on the floor the other day in favor of IVF treatment. There is nothing so moving and so profound as a family who wants a child and is having difficulty having it. There is nothing so moving as two parents or people who want to be parents. And in our military, that predicament is especially moving because they have committed to give up a part of their lives, one could say their lives, to serve our country. And we should make sure that they have access to this fundamental right. Again, I thank my colleague from the state of Washington, and I thank other colleagues who will be here today and all who are supporting this important measure, which we should be proud to support. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.